I mean, the Palestinians are absolutely entitled to feel enraged by the lack of accountability that Israel is granted. On the other hand, I have to take it and use it as fuel to keep me going.
In a recent tweet, you called the Israeli attack on Gaza a flagrant act of aggression. You called it illegal, immoral, and irresponsible. In those 3 days, as you know, at least 45 Palestinians were killed, including 16 children. So now what? I mean, what do you think should happen next?
The act is illegal because in order to use force under international law, either you are responding to an attack or you are authorized by the UN Security Council, and neither of these conditions were met in this case. Particularly in this case, even Israeli analysts agreed that there were no threats posed to Israel. And in any case, in international law, there is not such a thing like preventive self-defense. Self-defense is only justified to respond to a concrete threat, to an attack, to another use of force. Ukraine has the right to self-defense. And then I also said that it was immoral because it was an attack on Gaza, which from 2009 has suffered already 4 large-scale military operations, 4 wars. And this was the 5th. And I also said that this attack is irresponsible because, of course, Israel knew very well through this airstrike, they would have provoked a retaliation from armed groups in Gaza. And we know the means these armed groups have are not as sophisticated as the military equipment that Israel disposes of, which, by the way, clearly targets people indiscriminately, as the 46 people who lost their life, 15 of whom are children, testify. Accountability is needed. Who's responsible for this particular attack should pay.
You mentioned accountability, but we've seen how the Israeli government reacts to these kind of calls. I mean, just citing one example, as I'm sure you know, a commission of inquiry set up last year by the UN Human Rights Council after the Israeli assault on Gaza in 2021, that left 260 Palestinians dead, found that Israel has no intention of ending the occupation. And for their part, the Israeli government simply accused the council of moral bankruptcy and a bias against Israel. So when it comes to holding the Israeli government accountable, how does this really happen on the ground, in your view?
This is the problem, because in fact there is ironclad support for Israel from the major forces in the UN. Think of the US veto in the Security Council. And worse than this, I'm afraid, the consensus has grown. Look also at the reaction from Arab states. I mean, I was disconcerted to see that there was very few reaction to this attack. Israel is allowed to continue with impunity. And this is something that is concerning beyond Palestine, because it's eroding the very foundation of the multilateral order, the premise upon international law. International law either applies to everyone, otherwise it cannot just apply to the non-friends, you know, and we cannot make discounts to our friends and allies, because this undermines the validity of international law as is.
Well, part of your mandate is to investigate human rights violations in the occupied Palestinian territories from 1967 onwards. Now, how far do you believe your reports and findings will go inside the UN, given the fact that different Israeli governments refuse to engage with the UN, their reports or their resolutions?
And this is part of the problem, the fact that the Israeli government refuses to engage. So again, this exceptionalism to Israel and this condoning every choice of Israel, whether to cooperate or not to cooperate, it's a blow in the face of the system itself. And again, it gives a carte blanche, so to say, to others who want to walk the same path of impunity and non-compliance.
So will you be doing anything differently, do you think?
I think that rather than doing something differently, what I can try to do is to try a different how. I don't think that the large public appreciates the level of pervasiveness, the level of rooting of the Israeli occupation. The reality, and this is what I have to pass and I have to raise awareness on, is that Palestine has been occupied since 1967 and the modalities of the occupation have changed. And actually the situation has gone even worse than it was in 1967, up to the point that there are a number of, actually an increasing number of human rights observers from civil society and the UN as well, including my predecessor, Michael Link, who have denounced the reality on the ground as apartheid. Although the situation on the ground has reached probably the worst point ever in its history, at the same time, I see the signs of a new solidarity emerging in support of justice and legality in occupied Palestine.
On a personal note, I also want to ask you about earlier in the year when it was first announced that you'll be taking on this position as Special Rapporteur. Israel's ambassador to the UN called you an activist and that you advocate for Israel's destruction. Other pro-Israeli voices called you unfit and labeled you as an activist for Palestinians. This looks like some sort of effort to discredit you before even starting. How do you react to this? Do you feel that this, or there was maybe a targeted campaign against you from the very start?
Yes, of course. When it became clear that there was first on the list of the chosen people by the Human Rights Council, the attacks became more targeted on me. They were severe, and actually they were more. Most of the accusations entail also serious claims like anti-Semitism, which is something I firmly refute. Was I expecting this? Yes, of course, because targeting those who stand on for justice and legality in Palestine get targeted in this way. But this is a strategy to deflect the attention from the situation on the ground. So am I an activist? I'm a militant jurist. I'm someone who loves her profession, and I believe that justice is for everyone, or otherwise it's for no one.
It's been 15 years since the blockade of Gaza. Do you have any particular views moving forward on how this siege can end, or how can it be lifted?
First of all, this shouldn't be handled by Israel on its own, because as we have seen, Israel behaves like a bad faith occupier and runs an occupation which is illegal. So I doubt that Israel will have any incentive under the current constellation, under the circumstances, to lift the blockade. But the blockade must be lifted. So the United Nations should act as an oversight mechanism over a truce that leads to the proper lifting of the blockade. I appreciate the security concern and the right of Israel to protect its citizens, but I'm also cognizant that without ensuring safety and security of the Palestinians, being them in Gaza or being them in the West Bank, this will be very difficult. Once the Palestinians are afforded the possibility to resume a normal life, the situation, the tensions will diffuse. And of course, there should be an oversight mechanism accompanying this process, but it cannot be left to Israel only.